Johann Sebastian Bach is widely considered to be the face of the Baroque period and one of the greatest composers of all time. Born on March 31st, 1685 in Germany, he cultivated the use of counterpoint, harmonic and motivic organization, as well as adaptation of many rhythms and textures from other countries. Many of his compositions are considered to have laid down certain rules and elements of music that would dominate musical expression for the next couple centuries. For example, Bach-style counterpoint served as the model for many future composers, including Beethoven and Brahms. He was also able to intertwine all the parts of a certain composition together so that the whole would not be the same without one of its parts, and that one single part would not entirely be understandable without the whole. His use of architectonic principles in music have withstood the test of time. The combination of his counterpoint of melody, balance, completeness, and temporal elements bring together the principles practiced by musicians of the Baroque period. Everything in his pieces makes sense. The Baroque period in music is from approximately 1600 to 1750 AD and is characterized by the development of music theory, diatonic tonality, and imitative counterpoint. It also gave rise to many important musical terms and concepts that are still in use today. The Baroque period was essentially a result of a reaction to the old-fashioned music of the Renaissance period. During this time, composers realized that music was a legitimate source of entertainment rather than some church music, and that they needed to create works of art that would actually contribute to society. Baroque composers also held the idea that music, math, and science were all related in some way and sought to relate them all to each other. They also wanted to create music that imitated emotions through tonal organization. The word baroque comes from the Portuguese word barroco, meaning misshapen pearl. It was used to describe the intense change from the previous styles of music. This was a time for experimentation in music, and there grew an awareness of the different nationalistic styles. Science was incorporated into the harmonizing of chords and the structure and organization of works. In contrast to the modal scale of the Renaissance, the Baroque period utilized the major and minor tonalities that we still use today. There emerged a sense of key, and harmonies were created based on key and what sounded good. Another major aspect of Baroque music was the continuo, a continued bass part that provided the accompaniment through chords while another instrument provided the melody. The European Renaissance, which occurred between the 14th and 17th centuries, was a cultural movement that was characterized by the rise of humanism, the shift from religious to secular beliefs, and the rediscovery of classical works. Humanism, the belief in man, was the driving force of the Renaissance, as it convinced people that they themselves were the forces of change in the world, not God, and this prompted them to research and find out more about society. This, in turn, led to a scientific revolution and many scientific discoveries. This newfound interest in science and explaining the way the world works can be found in the changing tonality, the major and minor scales that were developed and utilized during this period. They are intervals based on the science of how sound waves work. Notes that were pleasing to the ear were used more, as well as more organized structure, as you can see in the score and these visuals. The pitches and beats were more organized and tended to go well with each other. Overall, they sound quite good. The overall notion of a great change was also apparent in music, as the Baroque era music shifted in huge ways from Renaissance and medieval music. Essentially, Baroque era composers represented a shift from the older, more medieval and religious ways of writing music to a more modern, science-based way of writing music that conveyed people's emotions and were used for the purpose of helping society. In this case, Baroque composers reacted to the changes that occurred during the Renaissance by adopting them and going along with them.
Also reflective of his time, though in a different way, was Igor Stravinsky. His most famous work, The Rite of Spring, a ballet, tells the story of a pagan ritual in which a young virgin girl dances herself to death as a sacrifice to the god of spring. Stravinsky is often credited with being one of the major composers who spearheaded the shift from the Romantic to contemporary periods. The Romantic period, generally considered to have taken place between 1825 and 1900, beginning with Beethoven, is classified by its expression of passion through personal melodies. Oftentimes, the music is not orderly and regular, as it was during the classical period, but nevertheless, it conveyed a range of emotions and was generally pleasing to the ear. On the other hand, Stravinsky's music was harsh and chaotic, sounding more mechanical than it did human. He utilized dissonance, the lack of harmony between notes, not as a mechanism to move between chords, as it had previously been used, but as a static element throughout his work to convey tension. Previously, music would become dissonant during the development section of a work, but then would lead to a harmonious resolution. However, Stravinsky's music grew increasingly dissonant as the work progressed, only to end in an uncertain and unsatisfying way. In addition to dissonance, Stravinsky also took rhythm to a new level. Instead of having the rhythm support the notes in a melody or harmony, Stravinsky often discarded the melody and replaced it with pure rhythm. There are many large sections of the ballet in which there is no distinguishable melody, but instead a combination of different rhythms, all interacting with one another. These two main techniques shape the rite of spring into a chaotic premonition for future events. Perhaps more significant than the techniques he used to change composition was the message that Stravinsky conveys through his music. After all, Stravinsky himself claims that very little immediate tradition lies behind this rite of spring. I had only my ear to help me. I heard and I wrote what I heard. I am the vessel through which the rite of spring passed. He first got the idea for the rite of spring in 1910, and it debuted 3 years later in 1913. In his work, Stravinsky expresses many of the common feelings of the early 1900s in Europe, namely the violence and destruction that the future, specifically World War I, would bring. During the early 1900s, Europe was starting to feel the tensions leading up to World War I. The growth of imperialism and nationalism through this time led to the formation of many military alliances. This caused tensions between the two sides, the Allied powers and Central Powers. These tensions were then amplified by events such as the Bosnian crisis in 1908, in which Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the Balkan Wars in 1912 and 13, which further increased tensions between Russia and Austria-Hungary. By 1913, these tensions had reached an uncomfortable high, and in the next year, 1914, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated, and the Great War had officially begun. Through his atonal and extremely rhythmic music, Stravinsky embodied these feelings of instability and violence that were circulating throughout Europe during this time. When the ballet was first performed on May 29, 1913, in Paris, it sparked a huge outrage, causing the audience to openly hiss and boo both the music and the dancers. While Stravinsky was responsible for the music, the ballet was choreographed by the famous Russian dancer Valsov Nijinsky. Like Stravinsky, Nijinsky also deviated from the classical style while choreographing the ballet. Instead of portraying grace and beauty through the perfectly pointed toes and curves of the dancers' arms and legs, Nijinsky had the dancers' bodies arranged in sharp angles and distorted positions. At the time, the combination of these two components was too much for the audience to bear, and even today, some are very against the composition due to its unconventionality. However, it is now commonly accepted that the Rite of Spring was an expression of the nihilism and chaos that was beginning to overtake the world, and the fear of the future that wrapped around many during this uncertain time.